Welcome back to Money 911, where we talk about health, wealth, and peace of mind. I'm your host, Kris Miller, legacy wealth strategist and founder of Healthy Money, Happy Life. Today's guest is a powerhouse in the realm of economic insight and wealth preservation. She's been watching and analyzing markets since 1964. She's not just an economist, but a currency life cycle expert, a former stockbroker, banker, and now the CEO and founder of Zang Enterprises. Please welcome the remarkable Lynette Zang to the show. All right, Lynette, it is fabulous to have you here. And look at, now this wasn't planned, but we are totally dressed like, dual stereo, right?
Absolutely. Well, brilliant minds think alike. What can I say?
I know. What can I say, right?
It's great to be here, Kris. Thank you so much for having me.
It's a complete joy. And I just have to say, I thoroughly enjoyed meeting you when I was in Phoenix and had the honor and pleasure. I got invited to your house, and I would really like to talk about all that at another time, because you have so many levels together here, in preparedness and the way your house is set up. But we'll come back to that, because we're talking about what is this the end of the dollar? And Lynette, you've been studying currency life cycles for decades.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think is the biggest red flags that we're seeing right now in our financial systems?
Oh my gosh, just open your eyes. They're all over the place. But I think it makes some sense to kind of talk about currency life cycles a little bit to make sure that the viewers understand this, because most people do not understand what money is. They just kind of think of it like it's a tool of barter, and it is a tool of barter. This stuff's a tool of barter. But when I talk about a currency life cycle, everything has a life cycle, whether you're a human being, right? And my granddaughter is 10 years old.
Oh.
I can guarantee you that nobody's going to look at her and go, oh, wow, she must be maybe almost 71. It's like they're not going to look at me and go, oh, I bet you're going to be 11.
Right.
So the difference is that people have learned how to recognize when a human ages, and currencies are no different. Everything has a life cycle. So understanding what that looks like and what that means for you is critically important. And the best gauge of it really is your purchasing power, what you can buy with this stuff, right?
Right.
Anybody that's watching can probably remember. I mean, if you had a $20 bill 20 years ago and you have a $20 bill today, that nominally is identical. They're both $20 bills. But what that bought you 20 years ago, heck, what that bought you 6 months ago, and what it buys you today is vastly different. That people will recognize as inflation. But I think you and I are both old enough to remember when inflation back in the 70s, that was a very dirty word.
Right. Right. Exactly. It's really kind of cool to me, and I've been purchasing precious metals, not like you have, but, for maybe a decade or so. But in this time, and I've heard it said, and you can confirm it, that the gold is literally outperforming the S&P. And it used to be, gold and silver are old school, right? It's just a hedge against inflation, but it's beating the S&P, right?
Well, it is right now beating the S&P, but quite honestly, I pay attention because that's what the viewers pay attention to, but that doesn't really have anything to do with the currency's life cycle or purchasing power, because when you're looking at it, what you're looking at is the spot market. And the spot market is simply a contract that controls a certain amount, depending upon the size of the contract, maybe 500 ounces of this, the real thing. and they can and do create as much gold and silver as they want to, because all traders care about is a little bit of pickup in money. They're not really thinking about inflation or purchasing power. Is it beating the S&P 500 right now? Yes, but why? Because of all of the geopolitical risk out there, all of the inflation risk out there, all of the risks out there.
Right.
Anybody heard about the tariff wars?
Hello. Right.
That's really why you're seeing a flight to safety. Because it used to be, and this is the big shift, and you said it in the beginning about the dollar dying, right?
Right.
Well, the world used to base things on the strength of the dollar, and now the world is turning away from dollars. That's not a new thing. It's actually been happening since 2000. However, since there's officially, I mean, anybody can go on the FRED, the Federal Reserve Education Department, and in the search bar, you just put purchasing power of the consumer dollar. And when you look at that chart, what you're going to see is that officially, out of the dollar's worth of purchasing power originally, there is 3 cents left and dropping.
Whoa, geez. Wow. Now that's shocking. Yeah.
Well, you know, it's a funny exercise, and I encourage everybody to do this. Go in there, pull up that chart, put your birthday in, and then see how much purchasing power this has lost since the day you were born.
Ooh, that's great.
But gold, when you're watching and you're seeing even the spot markets go up or down or sideways, it's really what's happening with this stuff. And that's my money gun, and I'm playing central bank because that's all they do. And every single time they do that, the value of what is already out there declines until you get to a big fat zero. And again, if you look at that graph, that's what the Federal Reserve is telling you that this stuff is worth. You'll look at the left side axis and that big fat zero. We are marching to it, just like 4,800 currencies that no longer exist. In fact, I think this is my $10 trillion Zimbabwe note. I'm a trillionaire. Problem is, I can't buy eggs with it. I can't buy anything with this. So that's the real problem that we're facing. There can still be dollars around, but they won't buy you anything, and they buy you a whole lot less. What happens when we get to that zero?
Right. What does happen? Right.
Well, what's
Exactly.
happening? Well, you know, Kris, you asked me earlier, you know, what are the signs that we're seeing, right?
Right.
And
Right.
that takes us to this big rush to digital assets and turning all of them from what's real into what's
Yep.
right.
Yep.
And let me tell you,
Sheesh.
gold, silver, they are sound money. What's sound money? Sound money is above all governments, all central banks, because it is used there. Both of these are used in every single sector of the global economy.
Right.
Therefore, they have the broadest base of function and the broadest base of, I don't know what a concept, demand, right?
Right. Right.
Where are these used? One area of the global economy, and declining quite rapidly these days. So that's why you have to have gold and silver.
Absolutely. And people, it always takes us a catastrophe to wake up and
Yeah.
like how many, and that's what I wanted to ask that there are these patterns and everybody's in this, hypnotized into and everything's moving so fast. And really the majority of the people are like, I keep seeing all these little sheepies about to go off a cliff because they turn on their cable TV and it's like, everything's fine. Just keep going this way. Right. And you have the brilliance of, decades of seeing these patterns that have repeated before the shift happens, right?
Yes, absolutely. And thank you, because absolutely I have been groomed for this moment in time. And you know, when you get old enough, you can look back and you go, "Oh, that's why I did that." And that's because in my past, I was a stockbroker, I was a banker, so I know how to read the technical language of the markets, and I know how to read these reports that these central bankers and large institutions publish. And guess what? If I don't understand a word that they use, I dig. I figure it out. And that's what I present in the YouTube channel to help people understand what is actually happening. And then beyond that, it's what can I do? Here's a concept to put my best interest first, right? That's what education does. It gives you the
Right.
tools to put your best interest first. And my personal goal is to translate this financial noise into understandable language so that the individual can actually make educated choices that does put their best interest first.
Well, and that's why I go to you as the expert, because you know all of those details. It's not my lane, and that's your lane. How can CEOs and everyday people like just take the simple steps to diversify, protect their assets now? What recommendations do you want to give them?
Well, we have a sound money strategy at Zang Enterprises, and the strategy is built on those repeatable patterns that you talked about. So we're trying to put you in the right place at the right time with the right asset to really have wealth transfer your way. But it always has to start with your goals and then what you've managed to accumulate. And then we want to make sure that we can protect what you've managed to accumulate first. And you definitely do that with different kinds of gold, because there's different kinds of gold, different kinds of silver. But everything always starts with your goals. So we want to protect what you've accumulated, make sure that you can survive the transition from the current currency system into the new currency system. And then what a concept, actually have some wealth transfer your way as we go through these transitions. Because Kris, when one system dies, another one is always born. So what you've got is gold and silver as that bridge to get your purchasing power intact from the one system into the next system. And then you can figure out where to go from there.
That's perfect. Tell us about the moment when you knew, with everything that right, the system was broken, and what changed inside of you after that realization?
You just gave me chills.
Mm.
You know, so I'm going to move back to go a little bit forward, but I entered, I've always had some level of participation in the tangible assets market because of my Uncle Al. But it was 2002 when the formulas, just technical formulas, told me that we were on the last leg of this currency's life cycle. I came into the industry, actually it was June 28th of 2002. And then in October, I got my final confirmation. So that's when I started accumulating gold and silver and working in this industry. But I knew that the system died in 2008 because as a stockbroker, I started and spent most of my career at Shearson. And so I was following what was happening there very, very closely. Now, technically, I had gotten warnings ahead of time, and we could go into that another time if you'd like to. But in 2008, I 100% knew that the system died. I couldn't believe it. I was getting ready to retire, Kris. I had a little 2-bedroom condo that I could just lock the door and off I go, traveling and doing all of this.
Right.
I did not think that I would see this in my lifetime. I didn't. I mean, I knew currencies had life cycles, but I just didn't expect this. But then the system was put on life support.
Yeah.
To give them time to develop the new system. And what was that life support? Oh, a whole bunch of this. And it's all they've
Printing
done
machine.
ever since. And I
Right.
know everybody likes that, but the truth of the matter is every single time they do this, it values what's already out there, but whoever gets to use it first, that's when it has the most purchasing power it will ever have.
Mm.
It's not gold going up. It's not real estate going up. It's the dollar going down in value.
Oh, right. That's so good. Oh, you just hit it right on the head there. Now, to get a little more, creative here, but how do you define real wealth? I mean, to rebuild trust in the financial system and starting with inside of ourselves, and there's a huge shift happening on a lot of levels here, don't you think?
100%. A lot of shifts. And so many of them, they're so hidden or they're so
Yeah.
complicated that the average person just, oh, I can't, I don't understand that. Again, I try to simplify this whole system, but the reality is that the dollar and all fiat money currencies are going away, just like this $10 trillion Zimbabwe note. And it happens when the final shoe of confidence falls.
Mm.
So something that I've been watching eagle-eyed is consumer confidence, consumer sentiment, and inflation expectations. And aren't they always talking about sentiment, confidence, and expectations?
Right.
This is a Ponzi scheme. Kris, what supports this? Do you know what we're told? The full faith and credit of the government.
Oh,
Have you ever bothered to translate that? As it used to be backed like by this, if you didn't like what the government was doing, you could walk in with one of these and walk out with that. But now it's just based on the full faith and credit. So as long as you trust them, you have faith, then you will continue to loan them money, extend them credit. So the currency is created by debt and supported by a government's ability to create even more debt. And that's the problem,
yeah.
because the debt bubble has popped. And how can I say that? Absolutely 100%. Well, if you again go into the Fed and you can look at the Fed funds rate, which is the overnight rate that the banks control, and what you'll see there is a 40-year pattern and system of constantly declining interest rates. And they needed the interest rates to go down because you can service a whole lot more debt if the interest rate is lower. But we all know what happened with that temporary sticky inflation, that nasty stuff. How does it happen? I don't know. I don't know how it happens. Look at that. I wish that happened to the Fed. But the way that so what really happened was they had to fight the inflation that they created. And how do you do that? The key tool that central bankers have to regulate the rate and speed of inflation are interest rates. And we know that the great financial crisis that became apparent to everybody or most of the public in 2008, well, they dropped interest rates, bam, all the way to zero and kept them there for 15 years. And then, I mean, there's so much more to that story.
Whoa.
Another day, there we could talk all.
That was definitely that. We'll have definitely. You were opening up all these other. Oh, I wasn't knew that. It's incredible.
I know, right? But then there's only one way to fight inflation, and that is with deflation. So what do the central banks do? They raise the interest rates so that fewer people, in theory anyway, fewer people borrow and spend. Well, that's when they pop that debt bubble because the government's idea is not to pay off that debt. It is to pay it off with dollars that have less and less value, which, by the way, is part of our strategy, the sound money strategy. Same as the government. But when they did that, they popped that debt bubble because all of the debt that's coming due is rolling over into higher interest rates. That means that they couldn't afford it before. Well, now they're even going to be able to afford less of that debt with those higher rates. So that's not going away. We're on a ticking time bomb. And it really all depends on public confidence. And that public confidence is very rapidly going away.
Right. There's something as you were talking just brought to mind simultaneously the other half of the planet, right? The bricks.
Oh,
And
yes. Mhm.
I'll push a button here because, most people don't really even understand what is happening. What's your thoughts on the Rio gathering, Rio de Janeiro and the bricks and all of that?
Well, okay. Here are my thoughts on it, right?
Okay.
The world is turning away from a dollar-based system, and I don't think that most Americans understand the exorbitant advantage that we had by forcing the world to use dollars to buy oil and lumber and steel and all of these other things. It created an artificial market for dollars, and that's a huge advantage to us in America. And that's why we have such a high standard of living compared to the rest of the world. But that actually started shifting in 2000 and has picked up speed. So when you're talking about the BRICS, particularly after 2008, that's when the BRICS were then created, right?
Right.
What
Right.
are they trying to do? De-dollarize, stop using and being as dependent on dollars. Now, there's a lot of talk, and there's always a lot of talk about the BRICS coming up with a new currency and then backing it with gold. Okay, boy, are there things that we could talk about there.
Yeah.
Number one, it's not so easy to magically just back an older currency with gold, because what gold does is it forces fiscal responsibility, and that means that any of the debt that they've accumulated, that's where it sits, and that debt is already not payable, period, right? They just can't pay it.
Right.
So what they have to do, and what governments do all the time, hence 4,800 currencies that no longer exist, they hyperinflate the debt away so that they repay it with dollars that have absolutely zero value, no value at all. And again, that's part of the strategy in the sound money strategy, is to repay any fixed rate debts that you might have with dollars that have absolutely zero value. So when you're looking at what the US did when we basically confiscated any wealth that was from Russia that was held outside of Russia, right? The rest of the world saw that. And this isn't the first time that the US has used their global payment system against somebody that they didn't like.
Right.
The world really took heed this time, and and that's what the BRICS are about. But I don't see them having the ability, and they never said it. It's just hopium, where people are hoping that they're going to back the new currency with gold. What that really is a common currency that they can use to trade between countries. My personal feeling is that digitization of all assets, taking, with tokenization, taking what is physical, real estate, rare collectibles, gold, and turning that into digits that can be broken down into it. This is their words, not mine, but broken down into itty bitty pieces and then sold all around the world with atomic settlement. You better have physical gold, physical silver out of the system, and even a certain level of cash, even though it's going to zero in terms of purchasing power. It's kind of your first line of defense.
Right.
This is just all a repetition of history.
Hmm.
I'm old enough to know that the formulas are way smarter than I am. Doesn't matter what I want, doesn't matter what I think. It just matters what's happening. And we have lots of data to determine what that is. And I can tell you without even one little itty bitty doubt in my mind, we're at the end. We are resetting into a new system.
Yep. I
What do you
totally
want to
agree.
reset with?
Exactly. I totally agree. And it gives you such peace of mind. I know it's proportionate to the person you talk to, but a lot of people are always asking me, how much precious metals should I have in my portfolio?
That's a great question. And because we can determine the true value of an ounce of gold and an ounce of silver, and again, it's just historical data, and it's easy enough to calculate that out. As I said earlier, that the first thing we want to do is protect whatever wealth you've managed to accumulate. And so there's going to be a certain, depending upon how the size of your portfolios or your intangible assets, there's going to be a certain amount of ounces of gold in different quality levels. But then it depends on each individual what they're trying to accomplish. So for example, a key piece that you do, and one of the things that we like to look at first, is how do you sustain your current standard of living? Well, there's a lot of barterability in that with silver, and you can see I have different sizes, right? So it depends on what you typically buy. If you're going to if you need a tank of gas, you're going to bring this. You're going to bring a silver dollar with you. You're not going to bring a piece of gold for that.
Yeah.
But for your real estate taxes, because there are things that put real estate in jeopardy.
Yes.
So make sure that you can always pay your real estate taxes. This happens to be a French rooster. It's here's an ounce, so it's fractional. Fractional means less than an ounce, right? So you can see the difference in size between those two. Yeah. Well, so you're going to need a certain amount of this based upon the current cost of your property taxes. So there's no blanket answer, because if, like me, a very important thing for the future of my family is dynastic wealth. And dynastic wealth is wealth that's lasted in families at least 300 years. And it's very simple. It has 3 legs on it: real estate, truly rare collectibles, and gold. Arguably, you could buy the other 2 with the gold, right?
Right.
So, but gold is real money. This is just concocted by governments to sucker you in, get you to work for less and less because of that almost invisible, well, their goal is almost invisible, inflation tax.
Right.
Right. So it depends. There's no blanket answer, but we can help you figure that out.
And that's why I want everybody to reach out to you, to talk to you, because you are the expert in this, and you really know what's going on. And there's no way, it's not a generic, 10% or whatever. It is exactly what you said. Tell everybody again how they can reach out to you, the best way to get in contact with you.
Well, first of all, I'm super active on YouTube and Twitter at the Lynette Zang, on Instagram and Facebook at Lynette Zang. And I love our phone number because we love human contact. Imagine that.
Right.
It's 33 GLDZANG. I'll translate that. 833-453-9264. But yeah, we're easy to get a hold of, and we have lots of phenomenally brilliant strategy specialists that can answer any questions, walk you through it, help you understand how much cash, how much gold, how much silver, what do I need to protect what I've accumulated, survive this transition, and even build some wealth base so that you're in a better position on the other side of this than you were going into it. What a concept.
Yeah, imagine that. There you go. Well, and definitely, your YouTube pops up in my Twitter, and I mean, there's so much value there that everybody needs to listen, because there's a learning curve here. And so you're holding, and that's where they need to go. Get the info. Lynette, do you think they're holding the price of silver down?
Yes. Okay. I do. Silver is the secondary monetary metal, and it is in very short supply. And I'll tell you the difference between gold and silver. Gold is indestructible. Silver gets used up in manufacturing. So we can account, which is why it's the primary currency metal as well, but we can account for about 98% of all of the gold that has ever been mined anywhere in any form, because at its base it's monetary. But silver is a diminishing asset, but it also straddles kind of like 2 worlds, because it's used, while both of them are used in manufacturing, silver is used more. So yes, it straddles the financial world as the secondary currency metal, but it's also in manufacturing. And so there are a few things in here. Number one, with the world on the verge of a global depression, right, and then high inflation, there's a pullback in use or buying or what have you. But additionally, through it's called financialization, where Wall Street has turned every instrument, every product into a trading product. It's heavily traded. And in those contracts, those spot contracts, you can, again, just like you can with gold, you can create as much digital silver and digital gold as you want to without limitations. And some people might recall back in, I think it was 2020 or 2021, when there was a rush to flight to safety into gold and silver, that the silver ETF, which is just a product, it's a digital product, that they had to change their prospectus so that it merely mirrored or mimicked rather the move in the spot market, because they could not accumulate enough silver to put their accumulation baskets together. So that's pretty, and then one more thing, and I know we're probably going a little long here, but this is coming up and I think it's critical for people to be aware of. In the US, most of the transactions in gold and silver are purely for trading. They are just derivatives. It's not the physical metal. In Europe, they are more used to working with the physical metal. So recently, some of your listeners might have heard how much physical gold was being, and physical silver as well, was being shipped into the US. But I want to stay on the gold for a minute, because it was the Bank of England that were actually sending over the gold from the countries whose gold was in their custody to satisfy some entities that were taking physical delivery of the gold and silver. Mostly it's just a contract and they're just rolling it over. So it's quite a huge, huge deal that these investors were now demanding physical. And what lies in our future, I don't know how far or how near. My guess is probably more near than far though.
Right.
What happens, because there's a finite amount of anything that's physical, what happens when those countries ask the Bank of England for their gold back?
Yikes. Right. Boom. Right there. Boy, there's a whole other conversation we could.
Yes, it is.
Right. Well, we're skimming the top here just to, get people's attention on how important this conversation is of all the podcasts that I have. This is so important. We're talking about Money 911, right?
Yes.
So we're living our legacy. We're not going to wait till we, cross over. We're living it now. So what legacy, just, to wrap us up here, do you want to leave for the next generation, and how can we join you in that mission?
That is such a great question. I'm really glad that you asked that, Kris, because I would like the future generations to have a more fair monetary system than the one that they put us in right now. And the only way that we can do that is to get sound money back in the system again. So at Zang Enterprises, we support sound money globally, but we also support community locally, because there are key issues that everybody's going to be dealing with. And food is the biggest issue for people typically as we go through the transition. But you also need food, water, energy, security, barterability, wealth preservation, community, and shelter. Get that local community established, because go to a farmer's market, go to a community garden. Even if there's not a plot there for you, even if you have no idea what you're doing, volunteer a day or so of your time. You will learn some new skills because farmers always need help anyway. You'll learn some new skills, but more important than that, really, is that you will create relationship so that if food becomes scarce for you, guess what? You have a relationship with somebody that is actually creating your food. And if they have to choose between you, who they know, and this person over here that they don't know, guess who's going to get the food? So there's strength in numbers, both locally to make sure that you can be as independent and self-sufficient as possible as we're going through this transition. But on a global basis, there are 8.4 billion people in this world. If 3% actually just converted some of their fiat money garbage to sound money, and if you don't hold it, you don't own it, so it has to be physical in your possession. If we could just get 3%, I believe that we have a shot. I think this is the best shot that I've ever seen, really, of getting sound money back in the system. Because what gold really does is it requires fiscal responsibility so that they cannot inflate your wealth away. They cannot trick you into working more and more for less and less, which is exactly part of the strategy when they created this system. Right. So yes, I am part of a sound money movement. I sit on the advisory board. On our website, there is a link so that you can see in your state where we are with legalizing gold and silver as legal tender. Florida just recently did it.
Yay. Right.
But then we have to get it. We have to do something.
Yes.
People say, "Well, what can I do? I'm just one person." Yep, that's true. Right. But if we come together in community, both locally and globally, what can't we do? I think we can do everything.
Exactly. Lynette, words of wisdom. And again, everybody needs to go to your YouTube, check it out, reach out, call you on the phone and get right, get ahead of the curve, right? Get on top of the wave. Lynette, it's a complete joy. I look forward, boy, I could see a whole bunch of other shows just pop up from that. And you are just a blessing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Wow. What a download of truth, clarity, and empowerment. Lynette Zang just gave us a masterclass in not only preserving wealth, but reclaiming sovereignty, self-trust, and freedom. This is more than economics. It's about awakening. So if you felt the shift, if something in your soul knows it's time to prepare, don't wait. Reclaim your power. Start with gold. Start with silver. Start by listening to the still voice that says, I deserve peace of mind. To learn more, visit LynetteZang.com and connect with Lynette's work on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and of course, YouTube. She's got a great show there too. And remember, you were born to live abundantly, securely, and freedom. It's not too late. You're right on time. I'm Kris Miller, and this is Money 911. Let's build legacies that shine brighter than gold. There's so much to learn about healthy money. I hope today's discussion brings you one step closer to securing and protecting your future. So you can get started on the right foot, go to meetwithkrismiller.com and schedule your free financial fitness strategy session. Thank you for listening, and please subscribe to Money 911 so you don't miss our next episode, which includes health, wealth, and peace of mind.
lives inside